Welcome to Satay,
Okay.
a podcast about the foods that have shaped Malaysia. I'm Dr. Nobby Leong, scientist, food writer, and broadcaster.
And I'm Philip Gibson, photographer and lover of the Spice Girls.
And in this series, we explore the history, cultures, and cuisines of Malaysia, from the ancient lands of Southeast Asia all the way through to the creation of a modern-day nation. In today's episode, we take a look at spices and the rise of Melaka. So pour yourself a glass of milk and get ready for Satay.
Okay. Can I get a zigga zigga?
So in the last episode, we talked about the emergence of trade empires in Southeast Asia, and notably Srivijaya. And so for 700 years, the empire of Srivijaya dominated trade in the region, connecting the huge economies of India and China. But by the end of the 14th century, Srivijaya falls, leaving a huge trade vacuum that's waiting to be filled. So today, we kick things off in the 15th century and take a look at how Melaka came to fill that void and how events at that time influenced Malaysian culture today. And so our culinary focal point, the food emblem that connects all of us to this point in time, is spices. So, Philip, how would you describe spices and not ginger, baby, sporty, scary and posh?
Well, that was definitely my first 5 responses. Spices. Well, yeah, I think of the smell, definitely first. As like, I remember when I was learning to cook, I would go through my parents' spice cabinet and just kind of like have a smell of all of these things. But then whenever I would maybe like stick my finger into one of them just to see what they actually tasted of, not much.
No, yeah.
So it's all in the aromatics. So I would say it's something that is integral to food, but it is not the substance of the food.
Yeah. So spices are various parts of the plant that produce strong aromas. So they could be the leaves, the fruits, the seeds, the roots, the flowers, stems, any part of the plant which smells amazing.
Right.
And so spices, when added to the dish, provide aromas and sensations. They don't provide taste.
Right.
So aromas or sensations, things that like tingle in the tongue, things that make us warm. Maybe the fragrance is very fruity and floral. Maybe it's sulfurous. Maybe it's citrusy. Maybe it's like earthy and nutty. So these are all things that you can associate with different spices.
Got it. Okay.
And they're actually the parts of the plant that it doesn't actually want you to eat. So plants have evolved all these spice compounds as a deterrent. So you were saying before that you would stick your finger into spices and it would taste like nothing, or they probably taste like nothing because they were old. But in general, a fresh spice would taste bitter, and that bitterness is supposed to ward us off.
Yeah, I would describe it to my parents. I don't think that they would have routinely used things like nutmeg, for example.
Yeah.
Or maybe even turmeric.
Yeah. But the reason why we as humans really like spices is because we're eating them in such small quantities in a dish that we experience what some scientists call constrained risk. And this mainly applies to peppery, pungent spices like black pepper, chili, and mustard, rather than, say, something earthy like turmeric. And so what constrained risk means is that we know that this is harmful.
Right.
But we're consuming it in such small quantities that we know it's not really gonna hurt us. But what this does is it kind of creates a little adrenaline boost.
Okay.
That makes us really excited, makes our tongue go crazy, kind of like riding a roller coaster.
Okay, so controlled nihilism. Like.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it. Does this mean that we all have personality disorders?
Oh, I mean, who doesn't?
Well...
So because of the unique properties of spices, there's really no substitute for pepper. There's no substitute for...
Right, yeah.
All these different spices. And that's why they're so popular.
And it's probably the first spice that people will come into is salt and pepper. And so pepper being that kind of warm, hot, fiery, yeah.
And salt being the taste.
Right, yeah.
So together, salt and pepper create a full flavor profile for lots of different dishes.
I would imagine, given that it's such a prevalent ingredient in the UK, it must have been one of the first spices to get over here.
Possibly, but there are spices that are native to Europe that probably would be easier for Brits to have obtained historically?
Were we arsed by it though?
We do love it in Malaysia though. So there are some that are more popular in Malaysia than others, certainly. But we've got lots of spice traditions and most of them involve curry.
Right.
You know, we've got curry-based noodle dishes like laksa.
Oh yeah.
We have a dish called nasi kandar, which is a curry dish from Penang, where you take rice and you flood it with all kinds of gravy. We have 24-hour eateries called mamaks, where you can go there any time of the day and they have, you know, curries in their bain marie and you just like load yourself up. We also do curry cocktails, spice cocktails in the modern age.
Yeah, well, that's true. In Georgetown, we did manage to. You got a what? Was it a laksa curry?
I got a laksa cocktail.
Laksa cocktail, yeah.
And yes, it did have belacan.
Which in
the last episode we discussed was a fermented shrimp paste.
Yeah, and I think you remembered saying that as the ice thawed, melted, and then the drink warmed up, you got more and more of those aromas start to hit you.
Yeah, it became more bludgeony as the drink went on, which was not a positive quality.
No, I feel like the bartender didn't expect you to take half an hour to drink it.
I was on cocktail 3, wasn't I?
Was it? I don't remember. Well, sign of a good night. Anyway.
So yeah, in Malaysia, spices are probably universally used. The only cultures that I think don't use a lot of spice are the indigenous Borneo cultures.
I'm trying to think back, but I think you're right. It was a lot of kind of like blanched and stewed vegetables and meats and stuff
Yeah. So some of these spices have been traded globally for, you know, more than 1,000 years, and they often had super high value attached to them because back in the day you could only really get the spice from its source, from the land it was grown in.
Right.
And so what these spice traders would do was to invent myths and stories about how they would obtain the spice in order to keep it lucrative.
Right.
In order to be like, oh, don't come to my homeland to get the spices. It's far too dangerous. Just buy it from me. So some of the myths are quite fun. So cinnamon was apparently obtained from the nest of a great bird. So this bird would use cinnamon bark to make its nests on tall mountains.
Right.
And so only by sacrificing an oxen or some other large beast could you distract the bird for long enough for some sort of brave trader to sneak up and steal the spice from the nest.
This has got a Marks and Spencer's. This isn't just any cinnamon. This is, you know, abseiled, hand-sourced, fought off a large bird.
Stolen produce.
Sent 2,000 kilometers across the, I don't know what that sea is.
Just for your Christmas pudding.
Just,
And then there's cassia, and apparently Arab spice traders would tell stories about bringing cassia to the market, and they would say that cassia was guarded by a terrifying bat-like creature who lived in the middle of a lake.
I'm kind of getting like a, you know, in Shrek where Princess Fiona's up in a tower and being guarded by a dragon. Like it's...
So you had to hire an ogre and a talking donkey in order to get cassia.
Okay.
Yeah. So spices do come from all over the world. And I think people would be surprised where the spices in their pantry originated from.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
So, Philip, I think we're going to do a little game.
Go on then.
I have a family recipe for curry powder. We use it for quite a lot of things, but particularly we use it for chicken curry. The curry powder has 5 different spices, and you have to guess the origin of these 5 spices.
Okay,
let's start with turmeric.
Okay, right. I know that that's a rhizome, or like a root. So I'm thinking, because turmeric is used so heavily, I would say in Indian food, in curries and what have you. And then I'm also thinking of like ginger being in like masala chai and stuff like that. It must be Indian.
Correct. Turmeric probably originated from India. Next, chili.
I think I know too much, and I'm going to say that I think it comes from South America.
Correct. It does come from probably Central and South America. Cumin.
Cumin? The name doesn't even give anything away. Not that I would know.
If you had to guess.
If I had to guess, where does cumin come from? Wildcard, North Africa.
Close, actually. Yeah, it comes from Egypt.
Oh shit, well, there you go.
There you go, yeah. And the last two, they come from the same place. They're fennel and coriander.
I'm gonna say they're maybe European because I've read a book about some ancient Greek poetry because I'm an asshole like that. And I'm maybe gonna say like Greece or Turkey or somewhere.
Pretty much the Mediterranean.
Okay,
usually.
there you go. Wow.
Yeah.
No more
That was
than I
pretty
thought.
good.
I'm surprised at myself.
Yeah.
And I would like to, as a disclaimer, I have not done any prior research before recording this episode. This is stuff that exists in my enormous brain.
Tells you a lot about Philip. So we have this Leong family curry powder in which none of the spices in it actually come from Malaysia or Southeast Asia. So this goes to show just how global spices are and just how much they circulated around the world. But there are some spices that are definitely unique to Southeast Asia. So lemongrass, ginger, galangal, they're all very tropical Asian plants. And then there's also cloves, nutmeg, and mace. And those all come from what historically people call the Spice Islands in Indonesia.
Which has such like mysticism around it, doesn't
Yeah,
it? The Spice Islands.
Sounds so mysterious.
Well, I think, I think, what do I think of? I mean, like the Indonesian archipelago is so enormous and there's so many islands, 17,000 or something?
So many.
In Indonesia today.
Yeah.
It's still volcanic, it's right on the equator. It is like, it's that way where you imagine you go to every different island and you come across a different spice in every one of them.
And so that connects us to where we left off in the last episode with the fall of Srivijaya in the 14th century.
And this is centered around Palembang in Sumatra.
Palembang and Melayu,
Melayu.
both of which are in Sumatra.
Right.
So Srivijaya falls, and someone needs to kind of take up that baton. Well, it's not like someone needs to, but you've got all this trade waiting to be scooped up.
Yeah, it's it would be an opportunity to. It would be a hard opportunity to miss.
So someone does take up that tantalizing little cherry and attempts to establish a new empire in what would become the city of Melaka.
Which, on a quick recap of geography, if anybody's looking at a map, they'll see where Sumatra is, and then across the sea is the peninsula of Malaysia, and you may see, south of Kuala Lumpur, the capital, a city called Melaka.
Which is where I was born.
There you go.
So it's a very, very old city and has a lot of historical significance for Malaysia.
So how did it come to be settled?
A few different stories of how it got settled. There are some differences, but the general people involved and the events are quite similar. So the two main accounts talk about a refugee prince from Srivijaya who lived in Palembang in Sumatra.
Yep.
He was either named Parameswara or Srivijaya Melayu. And Srivijaya Melayu was a descendant of Alexander the Great.
Okay.
Yes. I'll explain Alexander the Great later. It does have relevance.
That's quite a claim to fame.
Yes.
Like one of the most famous, warriors and military officers in the world. Emperor even, probably.
So the stories talk about this refugee prince, and he left Palembang with an army of Orang Laut. So remembering Orang Laut are the seafarers, the naval force, essentially, of these trade empires. So the prince flees because there are tensions with neighboring empires.
Right.
So goes to the island of Singapore and hangs out there for a little while.
Mm-hmm. We should preface this that this is before any European intervention on that island, and it was just a bit of a swampy, marshy
Island. No skyscrapers.
Yes.
No Chanels.
No Cartiers.
No Cartiers.
No Marina Bay Sands. No Garden by the Bay.
None of that. And so this prince and his family stay there for either 5 years or for 5 generations.
Right.
After that, a member of this family leaves Singapore, not sure why, and they head up north and eventually settle upon Melaka. Here, they come across what's known as a mouse deer. So this is just a really small deer. Right. And the mouse deer attacks one of their hunting dogs. This is seen as a really good omen. This site is apparently strong and really suitable for this royal family to set up their next empire. And so they do. And they set up the port of Melaka. So this port now attempts to function much the way as Srivijaya. It wants to connect traders from India and China. They can stop off here, restock, refuel everything. They can buy up products from the jungle like woods, resins, exotic birds, sea products, and of course, spices. And Melaka becomes a particularly good collection point for those very specific Southeast Asian spices like cloves, nutmeg, and mace, which you cannot get anywhere else in the world. And so they end up having a bit of a monopoly on the trade. So they're starting to increase because of their spices. But then in 1430, the Malaccan ruler makes a drastic step to try and boost their economy even further.
Okay.
And what he does is converts not just himself to Islam, but the entirety of his empire becomes Muslim overnight.
Okay.
And he probably converts to Islam for lots of different reasons. Right. One of them is that he can now call himself a sultan, which is a title above Raja, which is the current highest title.
Right.
So he's more prestigious, more reputable in this way. Secondly, he can connect himself to a long lineage of other Muslim leaders with a lot of eminence, like Alexander the Great.
Oh.
So Alexander the Great has different interpretations of who he is depending if you're looking at Islamic texts or other texts. But the other main economic reason why he would want to convert to Islam is that it now gave him access to Muslim Indian cloth merchants. And at the time, textiles were a basic commodity of trade. So the conversion to Islam allowed Melaka to really outcompete the neighboring trade empires. And it kind of did work. They began to expand in terms of their economy, and also their territory expanded. So other ports around Nusantara started to align themselves with Melaka, just as they had done so with Srivijaya.
To curry favor?
To curry favor, yeah. But we will point out that curry in curry favor does not actually come from the dish curry. It comes from a French word, which means to groom or like rub down. Yeah. So by the early 16th century, Melaka, people are saying that there's 2,000 boats anchoring at any one time. The value of goods coming out of it is massive, and the population is perhaps up to 200,000 people. So that is a very high end of the estimate.
But that is very high for that time in history. It would have made it probably one of the biggest cities on earth, probably.
Possibly, yeah. But, you know, Melaka, you can think of it as like Edinburgh during Fringe Festival, where the population booms and busts.
Oh, okay, between the monsoon winds.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
So to recap, because that was a lot of information, Philip,
Yes,
Melaka fills the trade void left by Srivijaya.
yes,
Melaka grows in power thanks to spices and the conversion to Islam.
okay.
And from the beginning of the 15th century to the beginning of the 16th century, Melaka becomes a trade empire.
Got it.
And so this does have quite profound implications for our culture today.
Right.
So if you think about what the dominant religion in Nusantara is today, it's Islam.
Well, it spreads all the way from the south of the Philippines through Indonesia,
Yeah.
Brunei,
Yeah.
and Malaysia.
And because this is a food podcast, you know, cuisine is very much influenced by religion. You have halal foods and haram foods. It also influences language. So Malay becomes now the lingua franca, that language that everyone speaks in the region, because you have this dominant port and you need to speak the language of the dominant port.
If you want to do business.
Yeah. So what historians have found is that places in Sumatra and Java might have had their own language and spoke their own language, but they also spoke Malay.
There's still a lot of dialects are still spoken across that whole region though, but
Yeah.
the common one would be.
Yeah, yeah. So like today, the official languages of Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, they're Malay. And then in Indonesia, you have Indonesian, but that is a variety of Malay. They're very similar languages.
Yeah, rooted in it, yeah.
But there are other parts of Malaysia's culture today that have their origins in the Malaccan Empire. So by the 16th century, one trader noted that Melaka was becoming very, very cosmopolitan. They heard 84 different languages being spoken in Melaka, including Gujarati, Tamil, Chinese, Javanese, but also Japanese and Armenian. So you have cultures from all around the world that are settling in Malacca.
It's quite a long way from Japan and Armenia.
Really, really far. If you're enjoying this episode, you can follow us on social media at SateOK. We'll be sharing beautiful photos taken by Philip of Malaysia, its people, and of course, the food. We'll also share photos of Malaysia from the archives, so you can see how the country has changed over time. You can also find links to give us a tip or donation to show your appreciation for the work we're doing. So head to our socials at SateOK or visit our website, sateok.com. And so all these different cultural communities are not just kind of passing through, some of them are also settling down here, as they had probably done so in Srivijaya's days.
Okay.
In particular, Chinese communities, Indian communities, Javanese, Thai. At the time of Malacca's empire, this gives rise to a whole suite of new cultures called Peranakan. Early traders from other countries, and they were always men, so Chinese men, Indian men, etc., settling in the Malay Peninsula and then marrying local Malay women.
Right.
And what emerged from these unions and these communities was a hybrid culture, and Peranakan is the name of that hybrid culture. Are you familiar with that word, Philip?
Today I'm familiar with the word Peranakan, but beforehand probably not. But I think as I was learning more about Malaysia, I think the word Peranakan was a word that was used a lot. I guess when you think about the fact that this was maritime trade, and then you think about these monsoon winds which are seasonal, if you miss the exit, you are stuck in these ports for 6 months. And well, men have an itch that need to be scratched sometimes. So,
and it's quite possible that, you know, these early men probably had multiple families.
yeah, well, yeah, it would not surprise me if they were strategic about it.
I could see a sailor having a family in both places, and neither of them obviously know about the other one because
For
it's
sure.
pre-internet, pre-whatever. You can't just
Facebook stuff.
yeah, you can't Facebook stalk your husband's whereabouts. But because they were coming and going pretty regularly with the monsoon winds, they could spend 6 months in their homeland and then 6 months at the Malaccan port.
Doesn't take much to imagine.
No, exactly. So you can see how these cultures and these communities emerged.
Yes. And so when you say about these cultures, what exactly, other than the fact that they would be having mixed race children, what was that then? Integration of the rest of life through diet, religion?
Yeah, all of that. So their communities often did a little bit of the male side's culture and a little bit of the woman's side's culture. So they might speak Malay, but their religion might be Hindu.
Oh, okay.
They might combine the spices of Malay cuisine with the noodles of Chinese cuisine.
Okay, which is where laksa came from.
Which is where laksa comes from. And so it was a fusion, a hybrid in many, many ways. So many different types of Peranakans, as I mentioned. My grandmother on my mother's side was a Chinese Peranakan.
Okay.
So she was like a nyonya,
Right.
Which is what you would call a woman of Chinese Peranakan heritage.
Which explains why there was so much nyonya curry getting served up in your parents' house.
Exactly. Yeah. But in this episode, we're going to take a look at one of the other Peranakan cultures. We're going to take a look at the Indian Peranakan culture, which probably doesn't get as much press.
I certainly hadn't heard of it prior to us going over there this year.
And possibly the reason is that Indian Peranakans actually don't typically call themselves Indian Peranakans. Right. What's more common is the term Melaka Chetti. So Malacca in reference to the origin, the Malaccan Empire, and Chetti is likely reference to Chettinad in India, which is the Indian part of their heritage.
Okay.
So Melaka Chettis.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I remember when we were there a couple of years back, you talked about like Kampung Chetti, which is a suburb of Malacca. And so when we are talking about how 84 languages were being spoken in Malacca during the height of its kind of trading empire, you would find, like in today's like big multicultural cities, that there would be suburbs of those cities that would be your Chinese suburb, your Indian subs, and things like that. And so when we think about Malacca and these languages being spoken, people would have gravitated around, I guess, temples of their religions or marketplaces or whatever it would have been that would have tied those kind of communities together.
So we wanted to find out more, so we spoke to two members of the Melaka Chetti Heritage Association of Malaysia. We spoke to Amuda and Nirmala. So we were invited to Nirmala's home, and she now lives in Kuala Lumpur, but she grew up in Kampung Chetti. And she showered us with a very generous banquet, showcasing Melaka Chetti cuisine, because they have their own specific cuisine.
And Melaka Chetti hospitality.
Which was very, very generous as well.
Yeah.
We were also given a dance lesson.
Oh, yes.
And we listened to their story about life growing up in the ancestral village of Kampung Chetti. They told us who the Melaka Chettis are, what their culture is, and the work they're doing to keep their culture alive.
It was a really, really fascinating interview for someone who knew nothing about it.
Absolutely. Here they are.
Okay, my name is Amu. That is what I'm known among my friends. But in the kampung, in our Melaka Chetti kampung, I'm known as Amuda. I would be 4th, 5th generation of Melaka Chetti.
My name is Nirmala Devi, but you know my full name is actually Nirmala Devi, daughter of Palani Maniam alias Palani Padiji Subramaniam. So if you call out my full name, it will be my name, my father's name, my grandfather's name, and my great grandfather's name. So and it is very reflective of what's important for the Chetti community, our ancestors. So that was, the thinking behind my name, and it's also the same for my other siblings. They'll have in their name registered.
That's your
legal registered name. Yeah. So name will have your father's name, grandfather's name, and great grandfather's name. So we'll never forget them. So every time we mention our full name, it's all their names included.
Although we are, like a hybrid, mixed, right? But you would notice that a lot of our Melaka Chetti names are very Tamil sounding names. Like my name, for example, okay, I've got a short name and the kampung name, but officially I'm known as Amudavadi. That's a very Tamil name. In fact, it's not even a Tamil name because normally it'd be Amudavali, then it's a Tamil name, but mine is, I don't know if I found anyone has got the same name as me. I mean, it's 2025, but still a lot of people don't know we exist. But this is what Melaka Chetti is like. We have Tamil names, we follow our Hindu religion, we are very steadfast in our rituals and cultures and all, but we speak Malay. Our food is very unique in its sense, and I would say like the Tamils don't know where to place us. Sometimes they even ask, so because you have got that Malay in you, do you take beef? Well, some of us do, some of us don't. Those who pray who don't. So that is like being a Melaka Chetti is about. We always have to explain to people what we are. You can forgive the international people who don't know who we are, but Malaysians don't know who we are. In fact, I don't know whether everybody in Melaka know who we are. Maybe not.
If you don't know who Melaka Chettis are, that's not surprising. As Nirmala explains, she's constantly had to prove her identity to other people.
So I was born in Kampung Chetti. We have an ancestral home in Kampung Chetti. It was actually called Kampung Tujuh before it was called Kampung Chetti. So it is the first house as you enter Kampung Chetti. So that is the Padiachi house. So I'm a Padiachi, and our ancestral home is still there. We have, of course, when I was growing up, we had like probably 5 families living together in that ancestral home. And my grandmother was, of course, the matriarch. So, we all had to, follow what she says. And we all grew up under the influences of our uncles, our aunties, and a lot of the Melaka Chetti ways and customs. When I left Kampung Chetti, to move to KL, university, and that was when other Indians started asking me, you don't speak Tamil? And I say, no. But you are Indian? And I say, yes. So they were confused about, where to place us. And I was confused as to why they didn't understand us. So at some point, I think it was like, I was also confused about my own identity. It's like, what do you mean? I have to speak Tamil because, I'm Indian. I don't speak Tamil. Nobody in my household, speaks Tamil. My grandmother doesn't speak Tamil. Then they ask, do you wear a sari? Then I say, no, my grandmother doesn't wear, sari going to the temple. She wears, sarong like what you see today. And they say, oh, then you're not Indian. Then I was like, no, I'm Indian. So, it was a lot of soul searching back then. But what happened was after I graduated, I was fortunate enough because my uncles were very much, active in terms of trying to create awareness about the Melaka Chetti identity. And that was when I guess I got roped into start on a working paper to introduce ourselves, our history to the Melaka government. So it was actually a comprehensive paper that I put together with photos and all, because it was like, for me, it was a little bit of a soul searching and trying to understand what our community, who we are.
You exist to the government?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was after that we had the the chief minister of Melaka who came to visit the village, and then there was a little bit more understanding or awareness about the Melaka Chetti community, because before that we were just in that kampung, we knew each other. Yeah.
We just existed.
So who are the Melaka Chettis?
A lot of times we get asked this question: who are the Melaka Chettis? And of course we always say that our forefathers are Indian traders who married local women, and we are the outcome of this mixed marriage. So if you look at it, and sometimes I must be very honest, I think of it and I say, these women who married all these Indian traders, they actually don't speak Tamil, don't know what it's like, in their husband's homeland, the religious practices, the culture, but they have succeeded, I guess, in terms of localizing how certain aspects of Hinduism that we practice. Yeah, so you'll find that for Melaka Chettis, we are Hindus. Yeah, we are Saivites, and all the major Hindu religious festivals, we observe them. There are differences a little bit because of the hybrid culture, but other than that, we are very, very much Hindu, and it's thanks to all these women over the years, who don't know where India is, what it's like, but they have actually succeeded in maintaining that practice and passing it on to the next generation.
And I think it's also very important to note, right? Like, it was actually the women who were like holding on to all these prayers, all these rituals. We learned everything from our, maternal side. Our grandmothers,
Because the men would come and go. They would, come to Melaka, stay, until the wind changes, then they go back to India, then they come back again. So it is basically the women. And if when I asked my father, and he'd say, he doesn't remember much of his great-grandfather or grandfather. It was always his great-grandmother and grandmother who were very predominant, in his life. And it's very much so, I think, for a lot of, Melaka Chettis in that generation.
Traditional way of life for Melaka Chettis was very different to what it is now, and Nirmala and Amuda shared what was life like growing up in Kampung Chetti.
Back then, the community, we were very close-knit. Because, like, for me, from the first house as you enter the kampung, I'll have to walk all the way across the village and to get to school. But coming back from school, if I'm late, every house you'll have the matriarch who will be outside the house and say, "Why are you late today? You're supposed to be back at 1 o'clock." Every home, and every home you pass by and you see this old lady sitting outside, you'll call them and greet them. So that is the kind of respect and the kind of care that the community had for each other when I was growing up. Yeah, and I'm not sure if that is happening today.
For me, growing up in the village itself, because we lived very near to the temple, and a lot of our daily life goes according to the temple timing as well. So because we live near the temple, so the temple's prayer will start at 6. It is my responsibility to make sure that the house is fully cleaned, as in swept and mopped and everything, before the temple bell rings. It has to be that way, because you're not allowed to like clean the house or have a broom in front of the house when the temple is having a prayer. And even in the morning, You know, they start prayer about 7, and that before I go to school, my altar has to be lit. That is how growing up in the Kampung Chetti is like. I don't know whether the Hindus follow like that, even if they were to stay near the temple. We don't cook meat on certain days, even like like maybe mutton or lamb, fish, and that's allowed. But anything that's bloodied, it's not allowed.
And you're absolutely right, because growing up also, because you know in the village you've got a temple at the entrance and you've got a temple at the end of the village. So the daily routine is governed by the temple bells. So 7 o'clock, the temple bell, the inside temple will ring. So that will mean that we should be leaving the house and on the way to school. And in the evening, when the temple bell rings, it means the altar must be lit, and everyone must have prayed, showered and prayed. So it sets the discipline, I guess.
Those traditions, however, have changed, and few still follow the timings of the temple.
Maybe over time it would have changed, because if people were still living there has gone to work, right? Because maybe for us at that time, because we were still children, so we just have school. But if those who still live there, probably they go to work and they come back 8, 9 o'clock. They can't keep to that timing, so that might have changed. But maybe those nearby might still follow. We're not too sure about it. Maybe certain things like you're not allowed to certain times of the month you're not allowed to go close to the temple. Maybe that they still follow, but the temple bell ring, maybe not anymore. Yeah.
Now you see that in my generation, after school, a lot of the younger ones left the kampung, the village, to further their education, and then of course to work, and that has also changed the structure of the families in the community, because back then you have 3 to 5 families in one home. Now it's just one family in one home. So yes, it has changed. The community has evolved in Kampung Chetti, and I guess that's only natural. But what's more important is that how we preserved our heritage in this changing world, because the world will change. It's more globalized now. When I was in KL, it was just about being a Melaka Chetti in KL. But now it is being a Melaka Chetti in this whole global context. And I see that, for example, in my children, they identify themselves as also a Melaka Chetti. And for them, they say, oh, okay, I'm a Melaka Chetti overseas. So how do I then, maintain a little bit of my roots, my mother's heritage? So this is where I think people in my generation have a responsibility to pass on what we know and help this future generation to practice their heritage, to live their heritage in this modern environment. So that's important.
A big part of the cultural preservation is the cuisine, especially with the year's main ancestral worship celebrations.
Food is very central to our culture, just like temple. Okay, so if you talk about ancestral worship, our ancestral worship is laborious, I guess. Work takes 5 days a week to prepare. Yeah. So and of course the 2 important ones for us ancestral worship is Parachu Bogi that happens on the 13th of January, on the eve of Pongal. That's where for us Melaka Chettis it's extremely grand, and in the past it was even more grand compared to Deepavali. Because that's when families will get, wherever you are, you come back, you participate. You help with the preparation, and all my aunties will be roped in. Everybody has to help, prepare for the prayers. Cook the food, cut the vegetables. It's a lot of work, and this is where also you have to show finesse in terms of how you handle the knife, because you're supposed to slice everything very thinly as possible. So that was, I guess, how important food is to us. For Parachu Bogi, for example, it's an elaborate affair, 5 to 7 banana leaves each leaf will have at least 12 to 16 dishes, and the main dish there is, of course, the nasi lemak. You have to get it right, and you don't cook it in the rice cooker. You have to steam it twice. So a lot of work there, and the most important thing is that for parichu, the preparation for all these dishes, you are not supposed to be talking when you're preparing it, for hygienic reasons, and also out of respect of the task that you're doing. Yeah, and when you cook the food, you're not supposed to taste it beforehand. So you're just going to season it, and of course, these are all seasoned, experienced cooks, so they know how much salt to put and all that. But you're not supposed to taste it beforehand. Yeah. So it's supposed to be cooked, prepared, and then laid on the banana leaves. And then we have our prayers. We invite our ancestors to come and partake, the offerings. And after we've completed the prayers, that's when everyone in the family will sit on the floor and will, eat the food.
But you see, that is where the problem comes in, because parichu being so big to us, so important to us, everybody come back, and there's already an air of festivities, right? How do you avoid not talking and laughing and having a beer at the same time, right? So it gets difficult, but we are always reminded that the ancestors are coming to eat. You have to show some respect, So even the way we cut the vegetables, the way we julienne the onions and all, maybe the normal cooking will be find it just chop nicely. But when we do that, we have to nicely cut it so that it looks. Take for example, water spinach, kangkong. Normally when we eat, we'll just probably chop it up, right? But when we want to do for prayers, we'll slice it very thinly, because once you cooked it, it becomes very delicate. Not only is it pleasing to the eyes, it's tasty, and it looks presentable. So that's how it's done. So food is just not about life, it's about emotions, and also it's about our reverence to our ancestors. Yeah, it has to be done that way. That is another thing that I noticed with the Indians, that when they cook for their ancestors, they don't mind tasting it, whereas we don't, and we have followed until today. So we pray, we say, ancestors, please help me, I'm going to be doing this. Give me your blessing so that everything turns out good. And most of the time it turns out okay, But of course, you have to have done this many times, at least a little bit, for you to understand. But forgiven if you one or two, near miss. So, but it's okay. But yeah, food is very, very central for us, only because we have got this prayer.
The importance of food and the realization that traditions are changing prompted the community to get together to make a cookbook. The cookbook was initiated by two academics, Julie Wong and David Neo, who partnered with many members of the Melaka Chetti community. But this was not an easy process.
There was a lot of attempt, to put together a cookbook for the community. But then it did not succeed because the earlier attempts, because people were very protective of their own recipes.
Yeah.
And then what happened was that the writers, Julie, she approached us and she said, hey, Singapore Melaka Chetti is planning on a cookbook. Shall we have a conversation and develop one for the Melaka Chetti community? And then that was when we said, yeah, we jumped on it and said, yes, I think, it's probably written in the stars that we should get something going. But, as we had the discussion, that discussion continued, I guess we had different goals and ambitions as to how we wanted our book to materialize. So we parted ways. Singapore had their own, and then we went on with our own initiative. And of course, we are very grateful to Julie and to also David, who are the writers. They've had, I must say, a lot of patience with us because we are all very, very protective of our own recipes. And if you look at the Melaka Chetti community, in every household, every clan, we all have a little bit of, the food that we prepare is a little bit different from one community, from one family to another, based on the flavors that we like as a family. But ultimately, I guess we found some middle ground. So what we did was developed a whole list of recipes. You wouldn't believe the number of calls that we've had. Those sometimes heated calls, which, then we said, okay, let's stop the conversation for tonight, we'll get back tomorrow. But in a way, we have I guess a strong bond for all those who are involved in this project. For us, it is the shared love for what we are doing today and the belief that this is for a good cause that has kept us going. And I think you can see the bond that we have. And I must admit that this has been a journey of self-discovery for me. I knew food which was just our everyday food and those food that we prepare for our ancestral prayers. But from this book, I realized that there were many more which I didn't know. And so we put together, a thinking cap and, put together a whole list of food that, we all eat at home. And of course, the people that were involved, what we did was we actually roped in the matriarchs in the main clans. And these are women whom you don't see on social media, but they have a wealth of knowledge. And we felt that if we don't tap that knowledge and if we don't document it, it will be lost forever. So that I guess, ignited our passion to complete this book as quickly as we could, because in doing so also, we had, of course, one recipe contributor who passed on before the book was completed. So for us, it was really a race against time to, collate and put together all this information in one book, in which everybody can refer to, at any point, if they want to prepare an ancestral worship in their own home.
To be honest, sorry Akka, when my sister said about this cookbook, I wasn't very happy about it because there's a lot of recipes in there that I did not want to go out. My mother was one of the elders, so she knew a lot of things. My mother was illiterate, but she knew a lot of things, from learning. So I was afraid people might claim it's theirs. They would just change something and say, oh, this is ours actually, just like how Malaysia, Singapore fighting over chicken rice, right? So, but I was very glad that this book came. You see, what happened was, in my family, when we have prayers and all, like I said, I was always the one who chop. I never needed to know anything until I started losing one by one of my family. And my sister was one of the recipe contributors, and she was a proud Melaka Chetti woman. She could cook with the eyes closed. So I never needed to know how to cook. So after she passed on, although the book wasn't published yet, I had to, search on the draft copies on how am I going to prepare this 16 dishes for the 30 days prayer. If this book hadn't happened, I would have failed miserably. I would have had to call a lot of my relatives and ask, and that would have been an embarrassment to my mom because she never needed to ask anyone. Everything was in her head. All these things like, how it's supposed to be done. And I had used the draft copy as my guidance.
The cookbook proved critical to bringing together the community and ensuring the next generation has the resources to get to know their own culture. And the race is on to preserve the culture for the future.
We are shrinking, crazily shrinking, and it is a worry. Everybody marries out. Yeah, you can't marry in because then you'll be marrying your relative. And we don't want that, right? So you can marry out, but do you still want to maintain your culture? Or do you want to say, take the easy one and say no? The future generation, they might say, I want to get to know my culture all over again. There, you have a guide. You can't say, oh, my grandmother died, so I don't know how to do it. At least now, my nephew's wife, they're nothing like us. They're very Tamil and all. In fact, to them, our parchu was like such an awe to them. She was showing the video to her uncles and all. Oh, this is how they do it. And then she was telling about how the food tasted and all. And she wants to learn a little bit, which is good. But if without this book, I think a lot of people like me would be really, really lost. And do we want to follow, or do we say it's too hard? And if we don't have this, what else do we have? We're not just a kebaya wearing people. We should not just be that, especially when you lose sight of the biggest, the glue of the family, which is, our ancestor prayers and all, so there's nothing left. What is the biggest threat in any community is intermarriage and migration, right? So when you migrate, people who live overseas, they can't do pacu, it's impossible. So they have to come back. But how often can you come back, right? And then if you want to do like bulan berbunga, where we put that flowers in the front door, you have different time zone. So eventually people just don't follow.
Isn't it ironic that what created the culture was migration into marriage?
Exactly.
And now the threat to the
Yes,
culture
is migration
into marriage.
Exactly. And even if intermarriage, right? Whereas the Melaka Chetti is more, the Melaka Chetti part of the heritage is more dominant than perhaps. But if supposing you have intermarriage and the other culture is more dominant, even in the kitchen, who rules the kitchen, right? If you have someone who's like, perhaps if you're married to, say, maybe a Eurasian, and then you're a Melaka Chetti, but then she's the cook or he's the cook, so you end up eating Eurasian food all the time. It's always like that.
Like any other small communities, we face challenges, internal, within the community, we've got different groups with different priorities. But what's going to be more important is for us to realize that the threat is not within, the threat is external. And that's why we should come together and look at the bigger picture about how we can preserve our legacy for the future generation. We cannot start, erecting fences and say, oh, because your linkage to the Melaka Chetti community is through the maternal line, so then you're not Melaka Chetti. We cannot do that, because if you do that, the community will fade within the next 10 years. And that's why we need to recognize whether you are a Melaka Chetti through the maternal or paternal line. You are a Melaka Chetti, and that is what we are trying to drive at, so that people understand that regardless whether my mother or my father is a Melaka Chetti, I am a Melaka Chetti, and I have this privilege of being part of this hybrid community, and I also have this responsibility to now play a role to create awareness about this community and to pass it on to the next generation, so that they'll be able to, wherever they are, firstly be proud of their identity, one, and also learn how they can practice all our rituals wherever they are. It may not be at home as in one family. It could be with a few families doing parachu together. It will change. Our practices will evolve, and we must open ourselves to it. We must accept and help help this evolution move in the right direction. We need to set the pace, set the tone.
I'm really hoping a lot more people will be listening to us. I mean, we've done quite a number of interviews, and especially the younger ones, that they have listened to what we are trying to, I would say, maybe promote, or make them aware that they want to be, they want to join us in pushing this forward. It shouldn't just be us, our generation. It should be the younger generation. We need them. Join the association and see where we're going with this. With more hands on deck, we can do a lot more, right? Because now we're just recycling, So we would like to see more participation from the younger people. I mean, even if the activists out there who like to preserve culture, who's into preserving culture preservation, get in touch with us, and see how we can work together, because we're dwindling. Very handful of us. Like how we used to say, we're the last Mohicans. Yeah. So hopefully.
And for me personally, the next step is to pass on this knowledge to the next generation, because in my mind, I still think of myself as that young girl sitting outside my grandmother's home, watching all these people, coming back from work or going to work. And then today, I look at my mom and I look at the other recipe contributors, and I see that this is the current custodial of our heritage. After them, it's me. And I need to make sure that I equip myself as best as I can. And because of the position that I'm at today, I was born before the internet era. I am now in the internet era and moving on to the AI era. Yeah. So I'm in this advantageous position to make sure that I can formulate something to pass on to the next generation. So that for me is a personal ambition.
And that was Amuda and Nirmala from the Melaka Chetti Heritage Association. So I don't know about you, Philip, but when we were doing the interview, I was getting quite emotional. I nearly cried a few times. It probably didn't help that Nirmala kind of reminded me of my mum, the way that she looked. And I think they both spoke with such passion, such urgency as well to keep their culture alive. And yeah, it was a very emotional interview.
They were so articulate, I think, about all of the problems that they faced, but also about their history and where they have come from, and so knowledgeable. And I think the book that they prepared, the Melaka Chetti Kitchen, is like the labour of love that's been to them. I think you sensed that from the conversation, because it wasn't just Amuda and Nirmala in the room. There was about 5 representatives who contributed to the book. Just a really, really great group of people who, I think, even her referring to the fact that, they would sit there on the phone as they were trying to prepare this book, and then they would get so angry about, no, you can't prepare it this way. No, it has to be done like that. Like they are so incredibly passionate about it. I think it's a bit of a different cultural thing where these people are still actively hanging on to and still have and live and were raised with this culture, whereas some of the previous contributors to this podcast have had to try and rediscover their ancestry. I think they can probably see the writing on the wall as though it's on its way out, and they need to do what they can to preserve it.
There's so many different challenges that the different cultural groups of Malaysia face.
Right.
And that's, I think, what this podcast has illuminated to certainly me.
Yeah. I don't think when you were planning this, you had anticipated that you would be, not that you wouldn't be speaking to a lot of the underrepresented groups, but that more and more would come out the woodwork as we were over there. And this podcast was only ever supposed to be about 6 episodes, and it's now going to end up being about 17, just because we keep hearing more voices from these smaller communities.
And surprise, surprise, a running theme with so many of the cultures we've spoken to is that they're just fighting to get acknowledged, and they're fighting just for people to know that they exist.
The fact that she had to write an academic paper to prove to the government that she's real is insane.
Yeah. As I was writing notes for this episode, every time I wrote Melaka Chetti, it kept getting autocorrected to Melaka Cheetos. So what's crazy is that a chip brand has more international recognition than a 500-year-old culture.
Yeah. Let's pick up the Melaka Chettis, shall we?
And as they mentioned, they have made a cookbook. It's called the Melaka Chetti Kitchen. It's a little bit hard to get if you're not in Malaysia and Singapore, but if you can obtain this book, do so, because it is such an important reference. And I can see the challenges that they would have faced in putting together this cookbook. If there are no other cookbooks that distill this cuisine, how do you distill that cuisine? How do you get everyone involved? Because it was an entire community that got together and discussed what dishes are going to be in it, what dishes typify Melaka Chetti cuisine, and what recipes typify that particular dish. But what I think is beautiful is that the community did come together. And how difficult is it in this modern age for people to come together for a united purpose and something as tricky and substantial as a cookbook?
Yeah, it's the will, it's the determination of it. I think that's what I find to be so admirable.
Yeah.
This is coming from the community that created the cuisine.
Yeah.
They are the custodians of it, and I think that was something that she talks about, how they came and went. The men came and went with the wind, but it was the women that stayed at home and created, preserved that culture.
It does sort of remind you of the importance of women in food culture today. It's such a cliche for chefs nowadays to be like, oh, I was inspired by my mother or my grandmother, but the reason why is because they were the originators of the culture.
Yeah.
But that is not to say that if you're a man, you shouldn't be taking up that mantle preservation of culture is up to everybody
Yes.
to do so.
And not just when the trade winds blow favourably.
Exactly. So if you are a tourist or visitor that wants to know more, certainly pick up the Melaka Chetti Kitchen Cookbook if you're in Malaysia or Singapore. It's a fantastic resource. You can also visit the Melaka Chetti Museum if you're in Malacca. And you can also visit Wun's Kitchen. And that's the only restaurant in probably Malaysia that actually does sell Melaka Chetti food. So if we go back to our history, Melaka Chettis originated in Malacca during the time of its empire, from the early 15th century to the early 16th century. And spices, of course, were a critical part of that empire and continues to be a critical part of, Melaka Chetti cuisine and also a lot of Malaysia's cuisines. So spices is that perfect emblem for Malacca's trade empire history. However, if you were to visit Malacca today, you're basically not going to see any evidence of this critical point in time.
Yeah.
There is no royal palace. There's no great mosque that did exist back in the day. Yeah. All of that is gone. And the reason why it's not there anymore, because in the early 16th century, everything changed for Malacca. And what began was a period of European colonialism. And that's the fun subject of our next episode, entitled Sambal and the Portuguese Invasion.
Yes, those delicious spices that were exported through the Silk Road and through maritime trade and found their way to Europe. These enterprising Portuguese wanted to cut out the middleman and find them from the source.
It's a really, really fascinating point in Malaysia's history, really fascinating stories that emerged there. So do not miss the next episode of Satay.
Okay.